Okay, we'd like to call the work session to order, and we'd like to call the meeting to order for the work session and turn it over to Dr. Whitney.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. As you may recall, you asked that we have further discussion about our goals and objectives. As you know, we do have 5 ongoing goals. They're general goals, but the objectives are the ones that we basically address and revisit each year. Right before you on pages 1 and 2, I have on the left-hand side, we've included the goals for 2013-2014, along with the objectives. On page 2, we have the adjusted objectives for each of those goals as well. At this time, what I'd like to do, if I may, is go over each of the objectives for each goal and see if there's anything that we need to add, reconsider, or delete. Starting with goal number 1, improve student achievement and close the academic achievement gaps. That's been an ongoing goal and obviously one that we continue to strive for. The first objective is to increase the number of schools fully accredited. As each of us know, many of our schools, or several of our schools, are accredited with warning, so the goal in this particular the objectives in this particular goal would be to increase that number of schools that are fully accredited.
Dr. Whitney, could I inject something here?
Yes.
Being accredited with warning does not mean failing, and I'd like to make sure everybody understands that point.
That is exactly right. When we talk about a school that's accredited with warning in a particular content area, is just that. It could be that, say for example, English, which many of our schools are accredited with warning in English, obviously because 70% of the students didn't meet the benchmark.
30% of them didn't meet the benchmark.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Well,
it could have been 25 students in the school that didn't meet the benchmark.
Right,
correct?
Right.
Right.
Very well have been.
Good.
The second objective for this particular goal is to increase the number of students meeting the English Standards of Learning benchmark. And while that may seem it's aligned with the first one, the fact of the matter is, in the event that a school is not fully accredited, obviously an objective should still be that we have an increased pass rate, particularly in English. You may be aware that we have worked very closely with the instructional department and with teachers to develop an English improvement plan, much like we did with math, and we saw a huge increase in some areas and some schools, specifically in math. The objective here is to see that same type of increase in English for many of our schools as well. The third objective, increase the number of students meeting the math standards of learning benchmark. And when we talk about increase, we're comparing from one year to the next. So even though we saw some really good gains this year, the expectation is for those gains to even improve as each year progresses. And the fourth objective under improving student achievement and closing the academic achievement gaps, ensure all high schools continue to meet or exceed the Virginia Department of Education's Graduation Completion Index, known as GCI, a rate of 85%. In most cases, we have seen an increase year after year, but the goal is to, or the objective is for that to get even better each year. Any questions or suggestions with goal number 1?
Dr. Whitney.
Yes, ma'am.
When we talk about these goals here, what do we measure them with? We say increase the number, but we don't have an increase measurement goal there.
We did not. The goal is for it to be higher than it was before. Now, granted, we know significantly, a significant gain is usually 10%. It's hard to say it's going to be 10% depending on where each school is. So the thought is with continuous improvement that each year we'll see an increase from the previous year.
Do the schools have a projection or a target?
They do. In many cases, it's that they're fully accredited, but in many cases, that may very well be if they have a math pass rate of 53, they're suggesting that their goal is, or their objective is to get to 70. Statistically, that generally doesn't happen as far as jumping that many points. So that will be their objective, obviously, to meet full accreditation. But within their school improvement plan, if we look at trending, many times we see an increase of anywhere from 7 to 13 percentile points. no other questions for goal number 1, I can move to goal number 2.
I
Sure.
just have a question, and the only thing is, are these not the goals and objectives that we went over in the work session this summer?
No, on the left-hand side, 13, 14, we went over those to show you just where we were as far as meeting them. The revised ones are based on what we did or didn't do. Right.
Okay.
The second goal is to provide a safe and nurturing environment. Again, that is an ongoing general goal. The specific 3 objectives are listed below: to provide quality facilities by ensuring all schools complete and submit monthly custodial checklist report and address concerns as needed. Now, within this goal, we're also looking at school safety. That's important because we included in your board book to make sure that the safety drills are completed as well. The monthly custodial checklist, as you well know, is a matter of making certain that our facilities are clean, addressing the issues that perhaps we have come across based on the fact that they have submitted this particular monthly checklist.
May I ask a question about that?
Certainly.
I heard that didn't all work out so well last year. How did it work out?
As far as, I think in some cases, the monthly checklist was submitted, but I'm not so sure that it was to the degree, the task was completed to the degree of checking it off. I think with the new supervisor, or not supervisor, but the foresman for custodial services, he's able to come in and do an external assessment as well, as far as the checklist is concerned.
Or will the checklist go directly to him?
It will go, he will complete it with the custodian, and it goes directly to the principal.
Okay.
And then the principal addresses any concerns.
Okay.
So there is a manager now for
Yes,
all
ma'am.
custodians?
Yes.
Okay.
The second objective is to promote appropriate behavior by increasing the number of positive behavior modification activities at each school and by decreasing out-of-school suspension. I think during the summer retreat, we presented some information regarding the PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention System, and I would say the majority of our schools have that system in place or a modified version of that system. And that's a matter of recognizing students when they're appropriate and trying to motivate them to remain appropriate and to continue to be appropriate. In turn, part of that objective would be to decrease the out-of-school suspension. Now, I think it's important that when we talk about this objective, the strategy isn't just don't report it. The strategy is how can I intervene before it gets to the level that a referral is made as far as to the office, or an intervention when they are sent to the office to decrease the suspension rate, or to make sure basically that kids stay in school.
We certainly don't want to send out the message that it's a free-for-all out there. We want.
Absolutely not. Right. I agree. We don't want to send that message out. And the third objective under this particular goal is to decrease the dropout rate from the previous year. Again, using the term the previous year, don't have an exact amount, but it's a matter of making sure that it's continuous progress, that number is decreasing year after year.
What Ms. Skeeter was saying is that wouldn't it be good to have a minimum number there, or a minimum percentage, so that we kind of knew where we were headed? I mean, if it were like 1%, I mean, that would be decreased, but
Right.
it wouldn't be very,
I definitely agree with you, and that's for us to have some discussion. If we want to put a certain percentage, or in many cases, what we may do is ask each school to put a percentage in their school improvement plan. And in some cases, they do, I believe, put it in their school improvement plan, the actual percentage that they're shooting for.
They have, for the high schools, yes, there is a big one.
Would you like for me to add this in the objective, each individual high school's dropout rate and the percentage points?
I think so. I think it's a good idea.
Because they're in different places.
Right.
So it would not make sense to say that, for instance, if Nansemond River already is at 7%, 8%, and then somebody else is at 12%, that everybody's got to make 8%, because the school with the lowest percentile already would not have to do very much of anything. So that's why lowering it makes sense, but if you wanted to say lowering it by 2% or whatever you come up with, I don't know.
Should be up to the individual schools, I agree
Right.
with that, yeah.
Right, but even though it's up to the individual schools, it would still be a percentage based on from where they began to where they're going. It doesn't have to be,
What would you suggest?
well, I would suggest that we decide what would be a minimum percentage, which would be reasonable, and say that each school would decrease out-of-school suspensions by at least 2%, 3%, or whatever would be reasonable. I haven't thought about what would be a reasonable percentage, but I do know from our being on the Pupil Personnel Committee that we would like to see a decrease in suspensions because that represents an increase in continued learning.
I don't know if I agree with
What
that.
about the dropout?
Oh, I'd like to say something. I've been a high school principal for 15 years, and I wouldn't want somebody to tell me that on the 10th day of May and I have a fight that I'm over the limit there. I think we need to leave it up to the principals to make that decision one way or another. I think it's their schools. They need to make that decision. I really do.
I don't think what I said was disputed that. I was just simply saying that if you say it should, our goal is to reduce the number
I think
of
that-
suspensions
It's
by
goal.
a certain
Yeah, I think
percentage.
it's a goal, but it's not we're not going to downgrade them for not reaching that goal. I wouldn't want to do that. Not a school that who may have a different population than another school, and I certainly would like to see us give the school some flexibility, the principals some flexibility in dealing with their problems. I wouldn't want to hamper a school by putting in a rule that is going to affect them directly.
Well, an objective is not a rule.
Well,
An
it's-
objective is a goal.
I know
it's
that. What I'm saying is I wouldn't want to put in a goal then that would hamper them in their ability to make decisions.
That's where we were.
What we could do,
Oh,
and
we're
generally,
still
when we
into it.
come up with specific percentages, we look at the trending to see if there has been growth and how that growth has steadily either increased or in dropout rate decreased, and say what would be reasonable, if you will. So it would be individual schools, but it could be still what would be reasonable based on the trending,
Right.
previous data.
Yeah, I agree with that.
When I was speaking of it earlier on Goal 1, I would hate to see us come up at the end of the year and say to the person who's accountable to us, the superintendent, we're going to increase the number of schools fully accredited, and then we have one school accredited over last year. I mean, that's a percentage, that's a step up, but we haven't given him a measuring tool to say, if it's 4 and then he comes in 3 or 2, it was working hard to get there. So I just think, when you have open tasks like this, it's hard to reach and then evaluate people at the end of the activity.
I think the other challenge is, and in principle, we've had this conversation, if there is marked improvement, but you didn't meet that particular objective, it almost feels as though, gosh, I've worked really hard and I've done very well. Say, for example, the school this year that increased by 21 points in math in one of the content areas, specific subject areas in math, 21 points, but they still were far from the 70 benchmark. That's marked improvement, but obviously we know it didn't meet the actual benchmark.
I'd prefer not to see a percentage set in there or a target number because each school is not at the same spot. Each school has different demographic populations in it. Each school will have different size schools. So if I had a school of 300 people, I may have a difficult time reaching 3% change because I may have everyone right there because I'm able to give more specialized attention as compared to a school of 1,400.
So am I hearing for the dropout rate and also for the decreasing in out-of-school suspension that we work with principals and have them set a specific goal for them based on trending and obviously
I like
continuous
that.
improvement?
Yes, I like that.
Okay, then we can do that. Goal 3, provide strong leadership for effective and efficient operations. Meet goals and objectives of the district-wide or division-wide comprehensive plan and school improvement plans for the 2014-2015 school year. Now, keeping in mind that we have a district-wide comprehensive or strategic plan, and each year we revisit it. It's a living document. As those goals are met, we obviously indicate that we've met them or the status of them. When I look at this particular objective, it's a matter of updating that comprehensive plan, and again, keeping it alive and noting the progress that's being made. The school improvement our school improvement plan, is something that obviously each school has. They have specific goals, and we would indicate just how well they've met those individual goals per individual school. Does that make sense? So it's individualized, but it will be measurable simply because they will be able to determine, or will be able to determine, if they've met their goals within their school improvement plans. And while it's only one objective, obviously it encompasses a lot with our 20 schools and our district-wide plan. That's why we kept it to just one objective. If there are no questions, I'll move to goal number 4, advance academic achievement through enhanced instructional skills gained by professional development. The objectives are provide relevant professional development opportunities that focus on rigor as determined by increased academic performance in the following content areas. And those are the 4 content areas: English, math, science, and history. When we talk about professional development, it's a matter of looking at the data and looking at that SOL strand and deciding what's needed, what do we need to provide. So obviously this particular objective is linked very closely with goal number 1, improving student achievement. So at the end of the year, when we're measuring this particular objective or determining whether or not we've met it, we're going to look at it by the district or by the division to see again if there has been an increased performance overall in English, math, science, and history. When we get into what are the strategies for this particular objective, each content area leader with our directors of leadership develop an English plan, a math plan, a science plan, and a history plan. And within that plan, they work very closely with the coordinator, well, not coordinator, but the professional development specialist to determine what professional development will offer. Again, it's really a matter of focusing in on the data and determining what's necessary in order to improve achievement. The second one is somewhat related. It's providing relevant professional development opportunities that focus on differentiated instruction as determined by increased academic performance in the exact same content areas. The difference between the two, we've heard a lot about our local assessments being hard or too hard for students. As opposed to using that word hard, the word that should be used is it's increased or enhanced rigor. So number 1 specifically focuses in on that rigor. Number 2 focuses in on differentiating instruction. In other words, what do students need based on where they are? What professional development opportunities are we providing based on the different populations? This may include the subgroups, as we know annual measurable objectives address. It also addresses specifically, and for our division, we look at how we can, what type of strategies might we employ to address students of poverty. So I think these two are closely aligned, but I do think that they are measurable, and the efforts that we put forth with our professional development would obviously address them. Any questions about goal 4?
So the goal, objective 1 would be, the focus would be on curriculum, and the focus on 2 would be on pedagogy, the way we're teaching it. Is that?
Actually, both of them will be on the instruction and the curriculum. The first one is focusing on rigor. changing, think of Bloom's taxonomy, of course, trying to make certain that we're teaching the way it's going to be tested, but also recognizing those basic C's: communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and things of that nature. Number two is focusing on the subgroups, but meeting the needs, unique needs of a diverse population, differentiating the instruction. Oftentimes, we say we expect teachers to differentiate, and while they put forth much effort to do that, it's a challenge to do that if you have mixed ability groups. So we need to provide the professional development to allow that to happen. And some of that you may hear about today when the principals describe what they're doing in a balanced literacy approach, guided reading, flexible grouping, a tiered intervention approach, where students are moved from one group to the next, and what strategies we're providing. In order to provide those strategies, we have to provide the professional development, so our teachers will know what type of strategies are necessary for those students. So that's the difference between those two. Are there any suggestions for adding objectives to goal number 4?
I'd just like to see us, what are we going to do with the teachers that haven't had the training in the upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy? Are we going to present them with in service? Are we going to have people from the State Department come in? How are we going to address that? I mean, even in the first grade, there are questions
Absolutely.
on tests that use upper level analysis and synthesis in their questioning technique.
Yes. The State Department we're working very closely with the State Department, but we're also working very closely with our own teachers who are doing it well. I mean, we have a lot of our professional development is some in-house. One of the things that I've noticed our principals have included in their school improvement plan is for a teacher to observe another teacher, either in the building or outside of the building, but still in Suffolk. The other piece is, which I don't think is used to the degree that it should be, is Edivation, formerly known as PD 360. I actually had an opportunity yesterday to look at the revised or updated version, and I was very pleased to see some of those clips are more appropriate as far as timing in today's lessons. Before, people were from the 70s, you could tell, or it was a lot of lecture, professionals talking about it, versus showing actual classrooms and showing how to implement guided reading lesson, how to really maintain a balanced literacy, or how to really impact rigor or enhance rigor using Bloom's taxonomy, those higher level thinking type skills.
Actually, I don't think that we are hiring anybody that isn't quite familiar with Bloom's taxonomy and differentiated instruction, because it is part of the curriculum of every
College or
College and
university.
universities, yeah.
every college and
I agree with
university
that.
that is teaching these teachers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know that we have hired quite a few people, but I don't think we've hired everyone out of college. That's
true.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I would certainly agree with you, but I think knowing it and truly implementing it is the big difference,
Well,
the
I
challenge.
agree, it's an
Yeah.
ongoing,
Mhm.
it's an
Yeah.
ongoing task.
Yes.
Tell you what, these SOLs do use the taxonomy to its 5th level.
Yes, we do. And those of you who are very familiar with Bloom's taxonomy may very well know that there has been a revision to Bloom's taxonomy. And we're using that as well. In fact, when we talk about lesson planning and lesson design, that's one of the reasons why they're so lengthy, is because the expectation, not just from Suffolk but within the state, is that teachers should use a rubric to say, this is what I'm including in my lesson design or my lesson plan. Have I included the essential action? Have I included the big ideas? Have I listed the cognitive levels? It's very easy to create a lesson when we talk about identify, recall, but when I want to synthesize it, the SOLs, remember now, we're tested in such a way where kids aren't just recalling, they're applying, they're analyzing. And so that's what we want to do throughout our teaching as well.
Ask a question.
Certainly.
What are we doing with regard to evaluation of instruction just for reliability and consistency?
It's interesting that you would bring that up, because I do think that certainly is an issue that we're beginning to focus on this year. And when I think of that, I think of making certain that we're providing quality feedback to our teachers. In other words, when we see that a lesson is not at the level that it should be, what type of feedback are we providing that teacher to say, this is how you can enhance your instruction? Or looking at a lesson plan and saying, why did you choose this particular activity? Tell me why. Why didn't you choose this? So it's nice to think that a principal's checking all lesson plans. That's not realistic. So I'd much rather them choose 5 this week, meet with the teacher and talk about that particular lesson plan, and have some open dialogue to say, why did you choose this lesson plan? How do you think this is going to work? Then observe, or during a walkthrough, see if it worked. If it didn't, provide that quality feedback. We have a number of our principals involved in the CERN project, which stands for Schools and Universities Research Network through William and Mary. And one of the things that they look at is not just what the teacher's doing, but they're looking at what are students doing. They're looking to see if students are engaged. They're looking to see if we can look at what students are doing, we can tell if the teacher's doing what they should be doing as far as instruction is concerned. It's an observation form that they have developed. Our principals are using them either on the computer or their iPads or their tablets, and in turn, they're able to provide teachers immediate feedback. In addition to PD 360, or Edivation as it's known now, they're able to use that observation form, provide feedback, and in some cases, associate a particular clip from Edivation to say, you might want to look at this one on critical thinking, or you might want to observe this teacher because I saw her do it very well, if it's flexible grouping or something of that nature. The critical feedback is very necessary, especially with today's changes in what we do. Because the bottom line is we're having to teach differently. We're having to teach differently than what we've done before. And as I have said a number of times, in most cases, those who are doing the most talking, they're doing the most learning. So we've got to make sure that students are actively engaged. We've also decided that we need to have discussion to say, what do we mean when we say our students engage? Is that just writing something down, or is it that they're having conversation? Some of you have observed the whole brain thinking. That is very much connected to where the teacher gives information and then the student has to share that information with another student. He's teaching then. And if you're able to teach, then you're able to understand.
What percentage do you think of our teachers are doing group planning?
I can't say the percentage, but I know it's a goal for all of them to do that. But I will say this, and I'll be just totally honest with you. As I've met with I think I shared with you, met with about 4 different groups of teachers since our last board meeting. We need to really take a look at what's happening during that group planning. One, if it's really used for group planning. In other words, it's easy as a former principal to say, I know all my 3rd grade teachers are here, I'm going to go in here and give all these announcements, and they didn't have time for planning. Versus, let's sit here and let's hold a true professional learning community. I know some of you are familiar with learning communities where we're talking about teaching and learning. We're talking about what did students master this particular 9 weeks? What do we need to do differently? What worked in your class? So the goal is for all teachers to have a common planning time. It's really a challenge on the high school level with all content area, although some of the subject areas we've been able to do that. Those schools that have seen an improvement in some of their test scores, they attribute it to the common planning time. The other piece to that is it allows the teacher to use some of the ideas, strategies, and concepts when they're doing their own lesson planning, which eliminates them having to spend hours and hours to plan by themselves. I know in some cases there might be a group of 3rd grade teachers, let's say, and one teacher's really strong in math. She may develop the skeleton of the math plan, or the math lesson plan for the next week. Now, I say this, I want to make sure this is clear. It's not a matter of her passing out that plan to each teacher, because every class is different. But she will pass it out, and then I have the responsibility to modify it based on the needs of my students, based on what I see, based on the data. So I say it may be a matter of it won't work for my students based on what I've seen, but I'm going to use part of this. Common planning is a huge piece as far as what's necessary and what we'd like to do. It's hard to say percentage. Mrs. Chavis, do you know a percentage? I put her on the spot.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'm just thinking that it is a good way to, there are teachers that are weaker than others. And if they are sort of forced into the same room where they're actually talking about their lessons, then the stronger ones will definitely be able to help the weaker ones.
Mhm.
That's the advantage that
Certainly.
I see. And then the students will benefit from that, from the stronger teacher, even if the student has a weaker teacher, for lack of a better word.
Very true. We certainly see the value in that and strive to have that common planning time. The fifth goal is to strengthen collaboration with stakeholders and increase parent and community satisfaction. The first objective is to promote family-school partnership by providing more opportunities for parent involvement, education, volunteering, and input. This particular objective, I almost, from our last meeting or discussions that I've had informally with you, wanted to pull out parental involvement and just leave a bullet as volunteerism. In fact, increase our volunteerism in our schools. And I say that because we do have currently our special education parent facilitator, and our Title I parent advisor or facilitator working on developing a plan that they'll be sharing with you to promote volunteers within our school. While across the nation we know that parental engagement has decreased, I think we have to own up to how much do we really want parents involved? And we've got to say we do want them involved and have to invite them to be involved and give them specific ways they can be involved. And that may not look like what it looked like 20 years ago, but making certain that we have a strategic plan, action plan. My staff loves the action plans that we do. An action plan that says this is what we're going to do to try to increase volunteers within our buildings.
I look at parent involvement as parents come into the school and discussing with the teacher what their child is not doing, or in what way could they be of help, or maybe get someone they know in the community who is retired or whatever, and give assistance to their children. I consider that parent involvement, and I think it would be very helpful. I think it is helpful if you have those types of parents who would do that. But our problem, as I have observed, that we don't have parents' involvement as we should because of their, I don't know, for whatever reason, they look at the school being the panacea of everything. Should do it all, and I send them to you. You handle them, and with that attitude, and that's what I would not like to see. But we just need to encourage the parents to cooperate with the teacher, and in a way that the teacher might see a need for their child. That's the kind of involvement I would speak. Volunteerism, yes, definitely, because you have persons out in the community who can give help and know what they are doing, along with of course, the direction of the teacher. They don't just come in there and do whatever they want to do, but with the help of the teacher. Parent involvement means, in my opinion, to consult the teacher various times and try to make sure with the teacher that they are very supportive of the instruction and the instructional program that is being offered for their child. That's why I look at it as parent involvement.
I think we need to take it a step further. I agree with you 100%, but I think we need to take it a step further and not just add the parents, but the community especially is important to help our students out.
No doubt about
Yeah,
that.
I think Linda brought it up in one of the earlier meetings that we need to have a volunteer campaign go on. I met with a civic group this past Tuesday, and it's evident the schools that are really pushing it, the principals are out in front of it. They're getting people in. They're putting these people to work, and these people are so engrossed in what they're doing. They're promoting the school in the community. So this is what we have to do, and I think it comes from the top to the top.
Certainly.
Let me ask you as well. Are you talking about taking out parent involvement and making it a separate objective? Because, see, I look at parent involvement on several levels, and in places where we have good parent involvement, I don't want to in any way
I agree with
discourage
that.
that. I think it's critical that we work as teams, that the parent and the teacher and the school work as a team in the best interest of the child. If they're working together and communication is good between them, I think that we should always be working on making that better and enhancing that in any possible way that we can. Because we do know that even though people push that whole notion of teachers do this and how much influence they have, if parents are working with us, kids can be successful.
My thought was to include a third bullet that talks
Right.
about volunteers, keeping the parent involvement, but taking out that volunteering piece. And it would read something like, establish a volunteer program and implement it.
That's good, because in the past couple of months, I've met a number of individuals who wanted to volunteer, were having difficulty. Not only that, I've met some people who are representing organizations that are trying to volunteer.
We need to open our arms to them because they're going to be our next best media resource.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
Because in some communities, you do have persons who are willing and able. I can only speak for my community, where you have Masonic people who are Masonic individuals who volunteer. They go out there and teach math, help the kids, of course, with the cooperation of the teacher, and they indicate certain students they like for them to work with, and they work with them.
You're one of them.
Huh?
And you're one of them that volunteers, aren't you?
Oh, well, I'm one at Booker T right
Yeah,
now,
right.
but I'm
Yeah.
speaking of in the Holland area.
Yeah.
I'm speaking of the ones who go out there and we're working with Southwestern students, and now they're also working with Pioneer students. And these are men. A lot of them are men who are doing this.
That's good.
Yeah. So, and this is very helpful for the elementary school students, because you know what we say about elementary students, they very seldom see the male. And so when you have males going out there, that's a double sword. So that's real helpful.
I think one of the problems about that I think parents have being involved today also, if I were a parent of children today, they're learning things that are so different from what I learned that sometimes I feel helpless. And I think that a lot of parents feel that way. They don't even know how to help their children because it's so different that their response is to simply retreat. And I don't know the answer. I don't know how to solve that, but I do know that that would exist for me if my children were in school today.
I'm sorry.
May I
go ahead.
say- No, I was just going to say that along with that, that while things are indeed different, and for those of us who do go into the schools, as I know you do, Mrs. Bouchard, and you do, all of us do, I believe, go into schools and volunteer to work with the children, it's a matter of letting the teacher take the lead. Even though I'm an educator, and even though I do all that and whatever, I have the teacher prepares when I go into the classroom. She has my folder ready, my activity ready with her directions so that I can follow them. And then, of course, I can advance whatever I know to add value to the lesson. But I think that's that partnership that we establish with the teacher, even if we go in as board members to volunteer, to let the teacher, when we enter that classroom space, to let the teacher be the guide and the one that shapes what we do. And it's helped so that I can have a positive effect on the outcomes, but not come in and try to rearrange things or undermine what the teacher is doing. I think, too, just making sure that we provide a welcoming atmosphere, that
That's the key.
customer service
That's the
thing,
key.
so that parents may not be able to teach in the classroom, but they may need to answer the phone, monitor the hall, they may want to work outside. We've had volunteers come up, and I don't think, I agree with everyone else, that it has not been encouraged as much as I'd like to see it encouraged. But we've had volunteers come up who do all sorts of things, from working outside in the garden to picking up paper or trash or whatever they find. All those people are ready, and in our various communities are willing to help at whatever level they feel comfortable. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that our schools are places where people feel welcome and where whatever they contribute is valued.
Yeah, and the more we shine a light on what's going on in our schools, the more trust we will have. It's not the other way around. If we try to hide our schools from the parents and from the community, then there is the suspicion that, I mean, they can decide, they can imagine anything about what we're doing. But if there are so many things that we should be proud of, that we should open it up and let them come in and let them help.
When I look at this particular, adding this objective, I look at bringing some structure to what we currently have and enhancing it. So, okay. Yes, that concludes the goals and the objectives that I have before you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and go into executive session. Can we have a reading to go into closed session, please?
Motion is needed to go into a closed meeting to discuss the following items and subjects pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended. The discussion and/or consideration of the personnel report and related information. Number 2, the discussion and/or consideration of the pupil personnel report and related information. Number 3, the discussion and/or consideration of personnel action number 1415-2. And number 4, consultation with legal counsel employed by the school board regarding a specific legal matter requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel, and more specifically, CR buy-in through his parent, TR, versus Suffolk School Board, all of which is authorized by Section 2.2-3711, 1, 2, and 7 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended.
So move.
Second.
Board members will please vote. Motion carried.
Now adjourn to executive session.